A sword is one of the most common weapons in fighting games. They come in many shapes and sizes, just look at Soul Calibur, which means there's a variety of sword fighting styles, and one of the most recognizable styles is fencing, where you fight with a thin sword and swift movements with the finesse to both attack and dodge the opponent. In this video, we'll be looking at the coolest fencers that fighting games have brought us. They just need to follow some of the techniques that we'd see in fencing, but they can of course break some of the sporting rules since we're dealing with fictional fighting game scenarios. Also, they gotta have the sword, or sword equivalent, which can go by different names depending on the design and style of fencing, like saber, foil, epee, rapier, etc. And joining me in this video, backed by popular demand, is my own mom.
Hi everyone! I was a Zorro fan growing up, so I'm happy to be back to discuss fencers and fighting games.
Now, let's cut through the top 10 fencers in fighting games. Number 10, Pierre from Breakers. Breakers is one of many mid-90s fighting games that took inspiration from Street Fighter and Fatal Fury, but never took off after the 90s fighting game boom, yet was still popular enough for at least a sequel. I'd put it in the tier of World Heroes or Fighting History, where it was popular enough for a modern-day re-release. The game has your standard lineup of martial artists, ranging from generic to sort of cool, and the sprite work is pretty to look at. It was developed by Visco, which did a great job for a company that just seemed to randomly cover every genre of video game in the 90s until Sega absorbed and disbanded them. But amidst all the obscurity with this game is the topic of this video. One of the roster members, Pierre, is a fancy fencer. As with most early fighting games, he had limited moves, but he made them all interesting. He has a few sword swings, but when he wanted to get aggressive, he could electrify them, or just swing his sword to create lightning. I'm not really sure how he creates the lightning, but it's probably not from the roses, which he also adds to his moveset. Like, he's got plant manipulation and electricity. This man's on his way to mastering all the elements of nature and doesn't even need a fully buttoned up shirt.
The roses are a nice touch. If he misses with the sword, maybe the thorns will slice his opponent instead. He's definitely light on his feet. He looks like he could be a contestant on Dancing with the Stars in his Zorro costume, since he's halfway there with the mask and the Z's.
I like that one of his moves has him slash a Z around his opponent, which is a clear Zorro reference, but shouldn't he slash a P for Pierre instead? Why does he slash a Z? Does he know about Zorro, or does he just think it looks cooler? Not to mention, this is a saber-style fencing sword, which is more prepared for slashing with a sharp edge compared to other fencing swords, like a foil that's more focused on the tip, so he's using his weapon to its full advantage. And also, does the mask actually hide his identity, since I think he needs more facial coverage to truly conceal himself, or maybe a hat? Well, either way, I hope no one discovers his secrets. Number 9, Lancelot Lake Knight from Battle Arena Toshinden. Battle Arena Toshinden was an interesting fighting game series. It had a super 90s anime aesthetic with 3D weapon-based combat, and it had a lot of gas in the mid-90s. The first game was released in early 1995, the sequel was released at the end of 95, and the third game was released at the end of 1996. With a big storyline to follow, and it being all over the arcades and PlayStations, it seemed like it was going to be a niche title for years to come, but just as quickly as it tried to take over, it vanished. Nothing was heard from it after its fast start until the final game was released in 1999, only being available in Japan and Europe. There was also a Wii game called Toshinden in 2009, but nothing about it was related to the original series outside of it being a weapon-based fighting game, so Toshinden 4 was an abrupt end to the series in 1999, and the characters introduced in that fourth game tend to be the most obscure of this already obscure series, and one of them was a fencer, Lancelot Lake Knight. He was a timid boy whose family had him take up fencing to make him more confident, and through a series of events where he met new people, he decided to team up with some other young fighters to enter the Toshinden tournament to be more assertive with both his fighting style and shy personality. His fighting style is solid for a fencer. You have low and high attacks, he can swing his sword to create a projectile, you even get a nice intro where he cuts up a rose with his sword, which is not the only time you'll see that in this video. Nothing super unique compared to later entries on this list, but you'll probably find something you like in this moveset.
I like the strong sweeping arm motion motions he wields with his sword. They match his uniform, very regimented and controlled, and his backward twirls into the air remind me of the double and triple lutzes performed by ice skaters in the Olympics.
The way he slams his sword down in the super move is pretty epic. And once again, this is a saber-style fencing sword, so the opponent's getting a sharp landing. I'm not banking on a Battle Arena Toshinden sequel anytime in the future, but if it ever comes to be, Lancelot has a lot of room to grow. Number 8. Lawrence Blood from Fatal Fury. Lawrence Blood is a matador and bodyguard for the main villain of Fatal Fury 2, Krauser. He serves as the sub-boss of Fatal Fury 2, and for having such a prolific role, he never really got to this level of honor in any other games. He only appears as a sub-boss in Fatal Fury 2 and Special, and then he appears in subsequent Fatal Fury games that have every character on the roster from previous games. But after that, when the Fatal Fury series was kind of absorbed into the King of Fighters series, he never got a spot in a King of Fighters game outside of a background cameo, so his status as a tough opponent fell off pretty hard. He wasn't the most iconic character, but he seemed cool enough where he deserved a few chances to return. His fighting style is all about his red cape for bullfighting, known as a muleta, and his fencing sword. In earlier games, he rarely uses the sword, mainly relying on his red cape as a weapon, but the later Fatal Fury games had a good balance of sword and cape. Though, even in Lawrence's first appearance, he hinted at his sword fighting prowess in his intro when he showed that Rose who's boss. He always has the sword hidden behind the cape, as if he knew bringing a weapon to a fist fight would be frowned upon. Surely no one will look behind his inconspicuous red cape for a trick. When he started using his sword more, he would take it out for a flurry of hits before putting it back, but that's really all he did with it. Just a few quick strikes in varying fashions depending on your button commands. In the end, his attacks with his sword were just not as interesting as the attacks with his cape. Plus, the cape goes well with his outfit.
He looks like a combination bullfighter flamenco dancer villain from a Harlequin romance novel. He does more with his kicks, punches, and cape twirls than he does with his sword. It's sort of an added accessory that doesn't come with the outfit. I wouldn't really call him a fencer in my opinion.
My favorite thing about his cape versus his sword is that his cape swings hit about as hard as his sword does. He either had to sharpen his cape or dull his sword to attain that. Number 7. Parasol from Skullgirls. Parasol is a princess who leads an army to take down the corrupted Skullgirl, and she fights with a gun and parasol that cries napalm. So, where's the fencing? Well, the parasol doubles as a sword, sort of. It's still a parasol with a blade at the end, but as we see in her story ending, she's a skilled fencer, which inspired how she wields her parasol. This is a foil fencing sword, so I would assume that her living parasol named Krieg was modeled after that type of sword, or maybe she learned to wield a foil because Krieg could be utilized as one. The parasol was passed down through generations in her family, so they likely knew what she was getting into in giving her this weapon. It's a living weapon, so fencing school was just step 1 of her training. The context for her teaching fencing was when she was training her little sister to take down the next Skullgirl, which was said to be Parasol if her own ending was canon. Parasol even has that fencing outfit as one of her selectable color palettes in battle. While she has wild attacks where she tosses out explodey balls, army men, or just shoots you, her more grounded attacks have her do basic fencing techniques with her weapon. She's got the light motions, the lunges, and the footwork of a fencer. It's just like a fencing sword, if that sword had bells and whistles that let it expand like an umbrella and could detonate bombs.
Such a stylish fighter. I love her parasol sword. What a great accessory and functional weapon all rolled into one. Is it really alive? Better than having a dog or a cat. It doesn't need to be fed. She could make a fortune selling that on Amazon. I'd buy one. And those series of kicks and jumps she does while wielding her weapon, I don't think she even needs the pistol.
Ready, number 13. You pose no threat.
Player 2 wins!
Number 6. Foxy from the King of Fighters. Foxy brings the style to this list. Look at that outfit. I used to think that she was wearing a deflated Dr. Seuss hat, but I later learned that it's just the flag for the organization that she works for that she ties around her hair. Then she has her pants that refuse to have pockets, and finally you have her half shirt that's short on the stomach but long in the back. Real long. Plus, the color of her shirt also matches with her rapier fencing sword, so modern fashion for a classic fencing style. Foxy has rarely shown up in King of Fighters games, just being an assist in her first appearance in King of Fighters 2000, and only making the roster of King of Fighters 2001 and an updated version of King of Fighters 2002. Otherwise, she's just a background cameo, being a former member of the immoral genetic experiment organization Nests, before it disbanded and then she went on to live a private life. With her lore being mysterious, I'm unsure if she had any special powers. She has a teleport here, a poison dart there, but her main ability seems to be having a sword.
Wow, she brings a sword to a fistfight. Is that really fair? Well, considering the size of some of her opponents, I guess it is. Anyway, I like the way she taunts her opponents with it. And the cape's not bad either.
Also, shoutouts to Diana, another fencer that Foxy works with who never gets a roster spot but comes out when she wins because moral support. We love moral support. Number 5. Ori from Under Night in Birth. Ori is an investigator and assassin of demons, known as voids in the Under Night world. Her parents were killed by these voids, so she teamed up with fighters who experienced the same trauma to make sure these voids hurt no one else. They joined an organization which dedicated itself to protecting humanity against the voids and learning about them. This organization was known as... I'm gonna mispronounce that if I try. With Ori being a trustworthy member of the organization, she was granted a powerful weapon called the Ruler, but it was not actually a ruler, it was a rapier, purified with holy water, and it allows her to summon the essence of another fighter named Thanatos. He doesn't do much fighting for her outside of her super moves though. His role is to mainly pop out every so often, extend Ori's combo, and then go back into hiding until she calls him back out again. And he has a sword of his own too, which is less conducive to fencing and better for just a big ol' swing over the opponent. That being said, don't be fooled by her summoning another body. The skill is all on Ori. She has to know the right time to summon Thanatos and when to use her own speed, where she can thrust full screen with the sword almost as if she's teleporting, followed by her jumping up, down, and all around with the sword.
I love the rapid fire of her rapier in tandem with the backward kicks to her opponent's kisser. Thanatos may have a bigger sword when summoned, but Ori's overall combination of jumps, kicks, and slashes are the wow factor in her fights.
Ori may be a girl on a mission, but she still manages to make her matches flashy when adding to her kill count.
Disclaimer, Ori does not kill, she just incapacitates.
Number 4. Mitsuru from Persona 4 Arena. Mitsuru is the president of a big corporation, but when she's not spending time being regal, she takes matters into her own hands and sword, and she's probably still regal when she's doing it. She doesn't have to take her extra long limo to the fight, but she does anyway. Ignore everything she's wearing though, because it doesn't impede her ability to fence. She has no trouble moving fast with the heels and fur on. In fact, the heels may help her because she has one super move where she kicks the opponent after a bunch of sword swipes, which I love the excessiveness of. That heel doesn't add too much extra damage. I think she just wanted to rub in some arrogance at the end. But otherwise, she just needs her trusty red epee style sword to poke you and her flurry of ice powers to hold you in place.
I guess she doesn't have to worry about getting blood on her sword. It blends right in. I love the ice power combo. Is that why she wears the fur coat?
Nah, if anything, that bodysuit would keep her warm, so that fur coat is definitely for show. In terms of playstyle, she's not so much fast on her feet as she is fast with her arms. She's got fine mobility, but she's not crazy quick in terms of walk speed compared to other characters. However, the speed at which she pokes with her sword is her specialty. It's an epee style sword, which is like the foil being sharp at the tip, but it's the heavier of the swords due to its handle and longer blade, so she's using it right, showing why she was on the fencing team in high school. It almost looks like someone's fast forwarding her sword motions when she gets going, or she can just go full screen with a single lunge to cover any ground that her running speed can't. It's also hard to keep up with her attack speed when you're shivering, because her ice-themed persona keeps the arena cool. She either sets up frozen impediments for fancy combos to bounce you between ice and her sword, or she just outright freezes you.
Does she make ice sculptures out of her opponents? She could rent them out at weddings.
No, she won't be able to do that. She can't keep you in the ice for too long, because the opponent can break out of it if she lets them sit there, because we have to have fair mechanics in a fighting game. But even if they did stay frozen, she just likes to break them out of the ice right away with her sword, because, you know, quick damage. Though she at least puts on a show when doing it.
You're mine now. An elegant finish.
Number 3, Polnareff and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Heritage for the Future. Polnareff may not be a weapon wielder by himself, but he can summon his stand, Silver Chariot, to fence with the best of them. With this game being the first fighting game adaptation of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Part 3 specifically, Polnareff's video game story is the same as it is in the manga, with a few confrontations modified to fit a one-on-one fighting game, or technically 2-on-2 if you count the stands. Polnareff is out for revenge against the man who killed his sister, and then against main villain Dio for mind-controlling him, and his moves from the manga all seem to be here. Silver Chariot's fencing skills rely on being able to poke in rapid succession with his sword, or zoom across the screen to ambush. Since this was the part of JoJo's when stands were introduced, Chariot doesn't really have a specific power, it's more just being a fast guy with a sword, so in the end, we define his main power as speed, even being able to remove his armor to move even faster to a point where it looks like there are many of him, but it lowers Polnareff's defense, so this power is limited to a super move. And while I said Polnareff himself is unarmed, you can play as an alternate version of him where he is possessed by the stand sword Anubis. While it seems like twice the sword, twice the fun, he has less moves to work with in this form, and Chariot doesn't have as much speed and versatility. Still, you get double sword action.
That Silver Chariot is one seasoned swordsman slashing and stabbing his opponents with super precision and timing. And Polnareff's moves aren't bad either. Does he really need his stand? He does a good job with that broken sword. How'd he break it anyway?
It's kind of a long story, but it ends with him not getting to finish his haircut, specifically the shave. The top of his head's okay. The top of his head's always okay. Number 2, Charlotte from Samurai Showdown. Charlotte is a noblewoman who likes to hang out with the common folk. She'd rather crack open a cold one with the boys than sit in high society somewhere. When various threats could potentially come to her homeland, she travels to Japan to take them down alone. Well, technically she has her carrier pigeon friend Pierre alongside her, but he's just there for flavor and arcade mode endings. Equipped with her sword and a bit of armor, she's ready to take on any foe, though she could have used more armor. Like if she gets stabbed in the shoulder, fine, but her bottom half looks slightly more vulnerable. She makes up for it though by being very mobile. She can hop and jump to avoid attacks to show why her legs need less bulky armor. I also like that she named her sword. That's charming. It's named La Roche, and it's an epee style sword, but as we'll see with some of her moves, she employs slashing techniques that are done with the saber style swords.
What a variety of multiple thrust attacks, from her sliding kick attacks and bayonet lunges to tri-slash moves with projectiles. She's a lady who knows how to work a sword, and don't even get me started on those aerial attacks. I could definitely see her joining Cirque du Soleil as a side gig.
She has many of of the fencing skills we've seen from other characters on this list, specifically the swift sword pokes in rapid succession and the clean diagonal cuts, but my favorite unique move is that she just makes triangles. Usually, when a sword fighter has a projectile, it's an element of nature or some sort of unspecified energy, but for Charlotte, she just creates big triangles and pushes them towards the opponent. I don't know why, but I find it funny how serious looking she is when she throws shapes at the opponent. It feels like a violent Sesame Street skit. Whether it's the points on a triangle or the point of a sword, Charlotte's always innovating how to stab you. At the top of this list, we went with what seems like the obvious choice. Perhaps there are stronger sword wielders out there, but when you're the main fencer in possibly the most popular weapon-based fighting game, you have a good chance to get this spot. Number 1, Raphael from Soul Calibur. Raphael came from a wealthy French family where he learned fencing, but when the wicked sword Soul Edge released a bunch of evil energy known as Evil Seed, a nobleman was possessed that attacked Raphael, who he killed in self-defense. With his family and the community not knowing about this evil seed, Raphael was seen as a murderer and had to flee. He was sheltered by an orphan named Amy when hiding, who he later adopted to start their new lives together. However, Raphael messes it all up by pursuing Soul Edge after this. Well, not really. Amy and him are still father and daughter, but it puts him in the moral wrong now. He wants to obtain Soul Edge to get revenge on the nobles for ruining his life. In challenging the wielder of Soul Edge, Nightmare, he lost, but survived. The wicked sword corrupted him and somehow turned him into a vampire. I don't quite understand how Soul Edge decides how to corrupt people, since no one else is a vampire after being corrupted. They just kinda turn different colors, but that's him now. With this power, he wanted to make everyone vampires under his command because he thought it would make the world better for Amy and himself, so he's doing things for his daughter. But his daughter's like, Dad, I don't want corrupted society for my birthday. Why can't you just get me something normal, like a gift card? So Raphael continues his pursuit of the sword with his newfound powers, which doesn't change how he fights much. There's a blood-sucking move here and there, but what's consistent among all his appearances, pre- and post-vampire, are his fencing skills. Equipped with his trusty rapiers, he's ready to slash and dash.
I like the varied attacks he performs with his sword. Using those upward slashes and downward slices, he easily turns his opponents into Swiss cheese, while still looking regal. Well, actually, since he's from France, would it technically be French cheese? Either way, his opponent will need a good tailor after the fight, and Raphael won't even need his cape pressed.
My favorite thing about his moveset is his preparation stance, where he moves his feet a bunch and wiggles his sword wrist to get ready to attack or dodge, but he can't block during this. He's just that focused. The stance can generally be a follow-up to some of his other attacks, so it allows him to get in quick hits afterwards or dodge the opponent swiftly if they try to attack him while recovering, or it could be a good starter since you're ready to react to whatever move your opponent has planned. I also like the moves where he covers his eyes and blindly stabs his sword in a direction, including behind himself, which is great for when you pop your opponent up behind you, but it's also funny if someone is just button mashing and has him do this move where the opponent is nowhere near behind him. So for bringing us an extensive fencing moveset in the form of a classy vampiric dude, Raphael is indeed the top fencer in fighting games.
Now you will see the extent of my power! You shall make a fine pet for Amy.
Now, what did you think? Were all these fencers worthy, or did some of them not deserve to make the cut? Who are your favorite fencers in fighting games, whether we discussed them or not? Let us know in the comments. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and we will see you in the next video.